Hello, thank you for watching this short demonstration of IBM WebSphere Automation in action. In this demonstration, you will see the intuitive user interface of the automated security vulnerability features that are available in the current release. These features include a whole WebSphere estate view of security fix concurrency, recommendations of relevant CVEs or common vulnerability and exposures for specific server deployments, and automated tracking and notification of new security vulnerabilities or PSERTs. With these automated security vulnerability features, IBM WebSphere Automation provides security-rich operations for WebSphere administrators to detect and act on security risks automatically to promote continuous compliance. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy this short demonstration.
And what we're going to start off with is the view of what a WebSphere operations team would need to do today in order to manage their WebSphere vulnerabilities. So typically what happens today is a security bulletin is published. It looks something like this. Our WebSphere operations team subscribes to all WebSphere security bulletins. When they're published, they get something that looks like this. This describes a situation that WebSphere systems are potentially vulnerable to. It describes obviously the date that the problem has been fixed. It describes specifically what the problem is, what sets of WebSphere versions and platforms that problem applies to, what the potential fixes, what the potential remediations or iFixes are. And what the operations team has to do is to reconcile this generic security bulletin against their actual deployed WebSphere estate. So they need to manually process and understand how this could apply to their environment. Having done so, they then feed that. Again, this is a manual process. Different customers do it different ways, but many of the customers that we interact with essentially manage inventories of their WebSphere portfolios through spreadsheets. So they'll take this generic security information, apply it to their WebSphere inventory, determine which particular WebSphere instances this particular problem applies to, and then prioritize which security vulnerability fixes that IBM have published are priorities for them to apply to their WebSphere estate, and which parts of their WebSphere estate, so which workloads they've got, they should apply it to first. Review that with their compliance officers, apply those iFixes, test them, and then update their inventory to demonstrate the state that their system is currently having applied that. So that's all a set of very, very manual processes. What we're doing with WebSphere Automation is taking the view of a customer's specific deployed WebSphere estate, ingesting all of the WebSphere security bulletins that we publish, reconciling those two things together, and automating the process by which specific vulnerabilities are targeted at specific WebSphere servers. So what we see here is a view of WebSphere Automation. It's a capability that's part of the IBM Automation platform. This has ingested all of the WebSphere servers in a customer's specific estate. And in order to keep it simple, I'm simply showing 5 servers here. We've tested this up to 40,000 servers, so it scales well. The UI is very responsive to the large amounts of data. But what you can see here is a mixture of traditional WebSphere servers across a number of different versions. So I've got 9055, 9056, 9057 servers deployed. I've got a couple of Liberty servers as well. And we can see all of the vulnerabilities that currently apply to each one of those specific server instances. So if we take a look at this 9055 server, we can see here are the vulnerabilities that currently apply to it. If we're interested in any particular one, we can click on that. It will take us directly to the security bulletin that impacts this server instance. So the ops team can have a look and see specifically about that. They can sort it in terms of the relative vulnerability assessment score of each CVE, and that helps them figure out which order they may wish to patch this in. What I want you to do is look at 2 specific servers here and show what happens as they go through that process. So this particular server here, 9057, I've currently applied two in fact, three iFixes to it already. So it already has these three iFixes applied to it here, but there is one outstanding. So if we take a look at this specific vulnerability, what we can see is that it applies to WebSphere version 9 and 8.5 servers. There are iFixes available. This will be rolled up in the next fix pack, but the next fix pack, as we can see here, 9058, that's not available until 2Q 2021. So we're going to roll that iFix up in June this year into the next fix pack. And so if you want to apply this before that roll up, this iFix here is available to do so. So what I'm going to do is very quickly show that happening. And in fact, I have a script over here. And all it's going to do is stop this running server here, apply that specific iFix that's been identified, and then start it again. Now that'll take a couple of minutes. So while that's running, I want to show something that's particularly cool that we can do with WebSphere Liberty servers. So let's take a look at this server here. This has no iFixes applied to it at the moment, but does have an outstanding vulnerability. If we look at this vulnerability, what we can see is that it applies to a specific range of Liberty servers, but in particular, it applies to WebSphere Liberty servers that are using a specific capability. Now, this is something that nobody else can do, but instead of simply targeting, reconciling vulnerabilities to version ranges of servers, we can actually drill down and say this vulnerability specifically affects scenarios where workloads are using this bean validation feature of WebSphere, and we can inspect, and in fact, WebSphere Automation does inspect the configuration of individual server instances, and will only reconcile that vulnerability to servers that are actually using that feature. And in this particular case, I will show you that this particular Liberty server is using that feature. So if we go over here and look at my Liberty servers, this is a Liberty server configuration. And what we can see in this Liberty server configuration is that this particular feature is configured. That was the one that was mentioned in vulnerability. I am going to reconfigure that server. So this is this test 9 server here. The TWAS one, the traditional WebSphere one that we're applying the iFix to in the background, is this server one here. But I'm going to update the configuration of this Liberty server here. And what you'll see is that it will immediately be recognized as not having this vulnerability applying to it anymore, because it's no longer using this feature. So save that server configuration. I've removed a particular capability. You'll see in a moment this test server going from a vulnerable state to a non-vulnerable state. There we go. And I want to quickly show as well what happens now if I reapply a vulnerability to a server. So introduce one, and the easiest way to do that is actually to put that capability back in. Now made that server vulnerable again. What you'll see as that flips back now in a moment to being vulnerable again, that's going to send a notification to a configured set of WebSphere operators to tell them not just that there is a security vulnerability in their estate, but specifically where that security vulnerability applies to. So if we go and look at the notification settings, as you can see here, I've set up a notification that's going to send, in this particular case, an email alert to this particular my email address. In the future, we're going to be building additional alert channels on top of the automation foundation to include PagerDuty and Slack notifications. But the feedback we got from our customers was that email was the thing that made the most amount of sense to them today. If I now quickly go and have a look what we should see, there we go. So there is a new vulnerability that's just been reported by WebSphere Automation. If I go down here and click on the link, this is going to take me specifically to the information about that vulnerability as it affects this particular server. So there we are. It's the test9 server. It was that vulnerability. So I know now not only that I've got that particular vulnerability, but specifically which server it applies to. By the way, that long-running background task where I was applying the iFix to the traditional WebSphere server, that was this one. That was this one here, has now been applied. That previously had 3 vulnerability fixes applied to it. It now has 4. So if we go and look in here, we can see in the patch history for that server, that's the one that I just applied. And one of the pieces of feedback that we've received from our customers in the advisory board when we've been interviewing them, demonstrating playbacks to them, is that they would like to see audit history of patches as they've been applied, again to improve the amount of detail that they have in their compliance reports. So that's one of the things we've got in our backlog. And I'm simply going to finish up with one more view. Again, customer request was they're using spreadsheets to manage all of this themselves at the moment. We've automated all the things that they have to do themselves with their spreadsheets away. However, they've also asked for the ability to be able to take any particular point in time view of their estate and for us to be able to generate a simple report based on which patches are applied to which servers, so that they can integrate the automation that we are providing into their existing processes. And so instead of them maintaining information like this themselves, they can now just generate it from WebSphere Automation. Okay, that concludes the demo.
Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you.